Welcome to Tales at Scale, a podcast that cracks open the world of analytics projects. I'm your host, Rena from Imply, and I'm here to bring you stories from developers doing cool things with Apache Druid, real-time data, and analytics, but way beyond your basic BI. We're talking about analytics applications that are taking data and insights to a whole new level. Global is a British media company that owns some of the largest commercial radio companies in Europe and operates 7 core radio brands, including ones you may have heard of if you're in the UK, like Capital, Heart, Gold, Classic FM, Smooth, and LBC. Now, we all know that radio and advertising go hand in hand, but so does ad spend and data availability and freshness. The digital agencies running campaigns on behalf of their clients and placing ads on Global's channels needed access to their data in real time to understand their ad spend, which originally was a challenge. So how did Global solve that? Joining me to talk through what they did is Miguel Rodrigues, head of engineering at Global. Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rena.
Okay, so I always like to start with a little bit about my guests. So can you give me a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I actually, long story short, started in academia. I got in touch with a lot of open source projects, things of the sort, but then I wanted to have a more practical impact on what my projects were delivering. So I ended up moving to mostly product companies, but also consultancy. I ended up moving into data engineering quite soon in my career, moving up as the years went by. I worked in different domains from retail to banking services and financial services, traveling, and now I'm in media here at Global for already a year and a half.
And what team are you kind of part of? Because I know Global is like a huge company.
Yeah, so the team I'm heading is the data engineering team. It's part of a wider data team, but here we have close to 20 engineers in different capacities, being them analytics engineers, and warehousing engineers, data ops engineers, data engineers, which end up working in different products across the company.
Awesome. So let's kind of dive into like what you work on a daily basis. Can you talk about kind of your key use cases?
Yeah, so here at Global, the data engineering team, they work mainly on the data platform. We also end up delivering different analytics engineering insights into lots of products around the company that end up serving analytics teams, data science teams as well. So products like Global Player or even DAX that will speak a little bit more. We also do provide all kinds of data for different kinds of reporting, being it usage or how's our listenership, where they're located, etc. So we end up being the middleman on a lot of those data sets. We also, as I mentioned before, are developing a data platform that's run on data contracts. And that is something that we've been investing quite a while for quite a while already.
So, for your data platform, you obviously need a database. So, obviously, if you're here, we're going to talk about Apache Druid, but kind of were you familiar with Druid before, or what prompted a search for a new database?
Yeah, so for the DAX use case, the digital ad exchange use case, we had there was this need to record and follow how our digital advertising ad campaigns were doing, and also outdoor monitoring were doing. This is something that comes in with logs every so often. So we had one of two options. We would either try to ingest these logs as they would come, so that we could provide very specific KPIs, or we could try in doing more batch processes that maybe fail. And when they would fail, they would not be. They would be more disruptive when they'd fail. They would give a lot of data regarding impressions, even revenue, which would be very important for our clients. Listening through rates of these ads, etc. So initially, even before I joined, we had a solution, if I'm not mistaken, in Postgres or maybe even Snowflake. And the biggest difficulty with this was that the infrastructure itself was not performant enough when it came to querying this data. because it's a lot of data.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's pretty typical. We hear like, a lot of people kind of start with Postgres or Snowflake. That's kind of like the go-to when you're looking for, a database right off the get. And like, you can't kind of go wrong with Postgres for a while. Like, that's kind of the standard.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, on our use case, we had, for instance, to guess when we had served around 10,000 impressions. Um, and we needed to provide these values quite quickly in case we need, for instance, to owe, in case we need to owe the rebate, or if they were we were over what we have given away in free advertisement. And what we saw that it took us so long that we ended up being over some of these times. So we needed them to support the first streaming first use cases, given that's how the team got their source data into S3. In this case, in AWS.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you what some of the key features that you were looking for. Obviously, like, streaming. Were there any other key factors?
So streaming, one of them definitely. Most the ingestion we end up doing in Druid is using Kafka topics, which is what we use in. Basically, we end up doing a lot of micro batching in Spark. We end up having to process data as it comes in multiple kinds of usage logs. What we also find quite useful as a key feature is the scalability that Druid provides, and the imply service itself provides when we want to scale up our clusters, and also the flexibility in schema evolution. Of course, what ended up being the deal breaker for us was the sub-second query performance. That greatly, it basically delivered on that very specific SLA.
Okay, so you mentioned, using Kafka for streaming. You kind of mentioned S3. Can you walk me through a little bit about, and Spark as well, where kind of how your data architecture is set up a little bit and where Druid kind of sits there?
Yeah, so we have a very specific S3 location where we receive logs 24/7. We use PySpark structure streaming to ingest those logs along different layers. The default, or at least, would be bronze, silver, and gold. That's the standard that we use. That's used across other companies. We basically use those to prepare, transform, or enrich the data. We use some other static sources of data to enrich this data, and then we end up pushing all of this data into Kafka, where it's then ingested into Druid. We use multiple ingestion specs. We even have a framework to work around how ingestion is done using Druid. And basically the variety and flexibility of ingestion allows us to load from S3, even if if anything goes wrong with an update, for instance, and we need to backload a full day's worth of data. We can also use a very specific and different sources across our tech stack to ingest data into Druid, not only Kafka.
And when you talk about, how much data are you ingesting into Druid on, like, say, like a daily basis, and then a follow up to that, like, what are you seeing in terms of your query speeds?
Yeah, so on query speeds, I can give a quick update. Our median is around 170 milliseconds when it comes to query speeds, which is quite nice. I think P99 it's around 110. I'm not sure on that number, but it's close to that. So usually, it's very rare for us to have any complaints about performance on these. It's only when we do major changes in the clusters, like if there's an upgrade, which is very rare. It may be like annual, or every 6 months, maybe something may come up. But then even the rollback capability is quite neat in that aspect. When it comes to volumes, we have our three biggest tables. Let's say we have an impression delivery, which is sitting around 250 gigabytes a day. We have an inventory one, which is around 60 gigabytes a day. Then we have a deal health one, which has around 870 gigabytes a day. So this all totals close to 1.2 terabytes a day. with a lot of historical aggregations done beforehand in Spark, and most of the data is ingested in Druid. It ends up being also rolled up on a daily basis, which reduces the amount of data that's stored. So we were doing some calculations, and around we have at least 50% reduction on the data that ends up being in Druid thanks to this roll-up capability.
So one thing I know that was a challenge was, data freshness and data availability. Can you kind of walk me through how you solve that?
Yeah, so we end up providing data, let's say 24/7. The whole process from end to end takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on time intervals between new source batches arriving. So we have basically the original data may take 2 to 10 minutes to arrive. So then it's the whole processing and then delivering that data into it. That's why we say we estimate it's about 15 to 20 minutes of new data arriving. Our basically, as I said before, our median queries run around 170 milliseconds. Actually, it was I just checked here. Our query time is 98% of the time is below or up to 110 milliseconds, and we have around 20,000 queries per 5 minutes. So we can do the math of how many those would be per day, but
yeah. I'm not doing the math in my head right now. We don't have time for that.
we end up having 150 million events processed per day, which is which ends up being. I told you we had about 50% reduction. Is a little bit more than that. We end up having around 400 output rows out of that.
So you chose the path of going to Druid with Imply. Can you talk me through that decision and why you chose to go with a vendor like Imply instead of open source Druid?
Yeah, so this was a decision that was made beforehand.
You're like, it wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but but I was able to dig a little bit back on why the decision was made. I mean, I also have my own opinion of why that was. Of course, I for starters, the fact that we're using an open source technology is really good, and then the fact that we have Imply helps with mostly how much it takes for us to provide any value through it. Because if we'd had to deliver a solution ourselves, we'd have to leverage all the Kubernetes deployments, all the Helm charts, and security, etc. And this is something that, when it comes to time to market, it helped us immensely.
Have there been, additional benefits beyond not having to do like all the configuration yourself? Please feel free to share your own opinion too.
Yeah, as I said, I think a quicker time to market definitely helps. Even managing like upgrades, rollbacks, it's something that's way easier through the Imply UI. I mean, it's way easier because otherwise we'd need like a specific team in order to be able to handle this. Even specific support issues that we sometimes raise, and in understanding how a Druid works, it's good to be able to use Imply. But then when it comes to the Druid configuration more specifically, we end up doing that a lot, given that all the work that we did with ingestion specs and how we deploy and apply those ingestion specs. So I'd say it's quite flexible, and we can still benefit from both sides of using a totally open source through it, and then all the managed service that Imply provides.
Are there any, additional use cases or integrations that you're exploring?
So yeah, as I mentioned before, one of our use cases is a data platform where we want to standardize our processes in data engineering. But not only that, we want to standardize where people can analyze their data. We want to reduce the amount of tools we're using across the business. And with this, we're looking towards using Iceberg as a data table format, which is quite rich and powerful. We would like to be able to use glue with it, because that's something a catalog that we're using across this data platform. We have more than 300 tables already in it, so it would be quite a win for us if we could directly ingest from that. Although we're mostly ingesting from S3 when we're not using Kafka. Yeah, marrying those would be a great win, I'd say, when it comes to the partnership. And also thinking of what would be the wider role of Druid across the whole organization. Is it the best tool that we can use for analyzing, for let's say, an analytical layer across all of global, or not? That would also be something we'd look for in the future.
Do you have any advice for people who are just getting started with Druid?
That's a good one. I'd say that don't come to it thinking that it's your regular database solution. A lot of people tend to minimize that aspect of these tools just because you can do SQL. It's just like your run-of-the-mill warehouse, because it's not. It's way more than that, and it's rather powerful a rather powerful tool to help you keep your data in place and well organized. Sometimes even the ingestion specs are very powerful, and what they end up doing is way more than you could ask for it to do. I'd say, for instance, even things like rollups are a very interesting thing to have in a presentation layer such as this. It's also so yeah, come with an open mind, but don't oversimplify things. Come knowing that it is quite a flexible tool. So be very careful when you apply changes. We've had when initially when we were learning about Druid and how it works, we had some unpleasant surprises, but to our own fault. So it was. It's been quite an interesting ride, I'd say, and we've grown immensely when it comes to our knowledge of it. So yeah,
I feel like flexibility and complexity are like just two sides of the same coin.
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's if I like the fact that, for instance, you can have scheme evolution and all of that in Druid, which is very helpful. But as you said, it's a double-edged sword. If you you can even quote some cinema characters here about responsive power and responsibility.
I'm surprised that have I done that? I may have done that. So like on last season's show.
Yeah, it's possible. But yeah, it's even the UI is quite helpful. And one thing that we would be looking for is even integrating, since I remember now, even integrating with Grafana would be great for us to even have more insights. We use Clarity for some of these insights, the ones I've provided. We used it when it comes to query times and all, but then expanding, like, not don't come at it in a very simplified like one just does one thing, presentation layer, or just a SQL engine. It's way more than that, and you can integrate and empower what you provide to other teams way more than initially you think of.
I mean, at least we're working like, with every release towards like SQL standard compliance for folks who are like familiar with SQL and are using SQL on a regular basis. And going back to what you mentioned about Iceberg, I know Iceberg support was launched a couple of releases ago and has been an ongoing thing. So that should be something I will keep an eye on for you. Miguel, this was great. Thank you so much for joining me today and talking through your project. If you want to learn any more about Global, please visit global.com. To learn more about Apache Druid, please visit druid.apache.org. And to hear more about what we're working on at Imply, please visit imply.io. Until next time, keep it real.